podcast you're about to hear is true. The names have not been changed to protect the innocent, the guilty, or anyone else. If you're interested in the same type of discussion related to organized crime that you hear in the traditional media, stop listening now. If you're interested in thinking differently or learning something, turn up the volume on your computer, smartphone, or mobile device. This is The Racket Report. Here's Frank Morano.
Welcome to The Racket Report, the podcast that tries to take you inside the world of organized crime from every angle imaginable. I'm Frank Morano, and you are in for a treat because you are about to get an inside look at one of the most prominent crime families in American history, at least in La Cosa Nostra history, and a look at how the Springfield, Massachusetts aspect of a crime family that is primarily known for the New York area was run for many years, and about how someone that was running that Springfield crew for the Genovese crime family, how his reign at the top of that criminal wing came to an end, and why he's telling his story now. Now, Anthony Bingy Arilotta was the former capo in the Genovese crime family, and he was the head of the Springfield crew. He's got a new book out, coming out in September, called South End Syndicate: How I Took Over the Genovese Springfield Crew. But before the book is out, he's going to give us a preview of exactly what you can look forward to reading. I have to tell you, I didn't sleep much yesterday, not because I was having nightmares, but because I couldn't stop reading this book. I can't wait to read the whole thing. It's incredibly compelling. And if even a third of what's in this book is true, it is an absolute must read. Very pleased to welcome to the Racket Report Anthony Arilotta, author of South End Syndicate. Anthony, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, Frank, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So let's begin at the beginning. Tell folks about your upbringing and how you grew up and how you came to be involved in mob life.
Yeah, so I was born in Springfield, Mass. It was a heavily dominated city, mob dominated. There was a lot of exposure with the mafia. You know, back then the mafia was a really powerful organization all the way up to even the present day. I mean, it's not what it was, but it's still, they're just evolving. They're just changing the course on the way they go after the rackets, because the rackets all have changed. But growing up, it's Springfield, Mass. was a heavily dominated, Italian-populated city. And organized crime was, flourished throughout the city and throughout the surrounding states, going into Connecticut, going all the way up into New York, going to Central Mass, and going into Albany, way deeper into Western Mass. So that was all the Springfield factions crew that they were responsible for running for the Genovese crime family. And, as growing up as a young kid, I had a great life growing up. I had good parents. My father had a fruit and vegetable store, Italian imported products. He was the biggest wine grape distributor in all of Mass. I used to work for him. That's the only job I really had until later on in life when I got out of all this. So it was a family business. I used to work with him. And it was nice. I grew up nice. I was into sports as a young kid. I was always getting into fights and getting into trouble, but I was always into sports. And growing up with the neighborhood kids, we had like I said, a lot of Italians, heavily populated. We had a gang of us. The south end of Springfield was loaded, back then with different age groups of Italians. And that's how I grew up, working with my father's business. And, we were constantly getting into fights as young kids, and it led me to getting arrested several times and eventually, going to prison at a young age, state prison in Mass. But yeah, the younger years were really good with me. I have no complaints. I was brought up by a good family, and it was fun around here in Springfield.
And so, what exactly, I've talked with a lot of folks that end up down a wayward path, and they describe growing up in near poverty and mafia life being the only avenue available to them, given their disadvantages. And it was something that their parents were involved in, maybe even their grandparents. It doesn't sound like that was the case with you. It sounds like your early days in Springfield were relatively bucolic. Tell me how you first got involved with Wise Guys and what was it about that life that drew you in?
Yeah, so that's a good point right there because a lot of like even with gang kids growing up, they're in poverty. The streets are the only way to get succeed in life. With me, it was different, but at the same time, being Italian and being a wild kid, like I said, always fighting, getting in trouble, the mafia presence was so strong that when you saw all these mafia guys, they used to come into my father's store. Being a young kid, it was impressionable. You wanted like what you were interested in like what they do, and you wanted to maybe follow in their steps because they were feared. My family used to always give them respect, but at the same time, some of my family would say they're bad people, but they would still show them respect. So I think what brought me in about that was I was impressionable about who they were at a young age. Still, that doesn't mean that you're going to be one of them. You still have to, eventually grow into that and be selected into that lifestyle. It's not just like you could say, I'm going to be a mafia guy. So with me, as I started getting older in my later teens, and I was involved in violence, and that's what the mafia likes. They like young, especially back then, younger kids that were capable of violence, but also that could go out and make money. And back in those days, there was lots of ways that you could make money on the streets through loan sharking, gambling, sports gambling. We had a big vending business. There was a lot of street rackets, casino nights that you could flourish and making money. And I was good at that. So I started, doing all that in my, and I didn't have to do it. Like I said, I wasn't in poverty and I lived in a good home. I didn't have to worry about, food on the table or anything like that. It was just something that I liked to do. Mm-hmm. And I liked the camaraderie of being around a gang of us and, and that mafia presence, because when you went out, you saw the respect that they got. They got treated with, when they walked into restaurants, people would bend over backwards to wait on them, roll the red carpet treatment out for them. And they were feared. So that was always alluring to me. But at the same time, I kind of like grew into it. And when I finally started getting involved with them, in the beginning was when I went to prison and I was like 21 years old. I had a gun case, a shooting case, and I had a 5-year sentence. I had to do a mandatory 1 year. After that 1 year sentence, I was approached by the local mafia soldiers in the Springfield faction. And they wanted me to join up with them and team up with them and, be a part of their organization, meaning like putting me formally on record with them. Mm-hmm. And that's the case that happened to me. Al Bruno came to me when I got home from prison in 91, and he asked me to formally be on record with the Genovese family. But that still like didn't make me that's how I got formally recognized with the Genovese family on record. But what made me, getting back to your point, what made me want to go that route was, working for my father. It was a really hard, laborious job. I mean, he had a great business, one of the most successful businesses in all of Springfield. Like I said, he had the biggest wine grape distributorship, but it was hard work. It was backbreaking work, and it didn't offer, me being a kid, I didn't make a lot of money there. And when I got out of prison, I got involved in the marijuana business. And one of my first deals I did I left my father's work and I went and sold 10 pounds of marijuana. And I made around $400 a pound, and it took me a half hour to complete the sale. So I made $4,000 in, say, an hour's worth of time.
Wow.
And I was working for my father 80 hours a week, and I would make $400 for the whole week. So that's what kind of like drew me into the, the streets, let's just say, the money aspect of it, and the marijuana had nothing to do with the mob. The mob didn't mess around in drugs. So that was just like me getting involved in the street rackets. And that's what got me, involved, where you just asked, like, what got me involved, getting involved in the streets was that. It was the money part of it. I made money and I started getting involved in the marijuana business. And then that's when the mob approached me and wanted me to be with them. So it all kind of happened at once in like 1991.
So you're not making any bones about your reasons for wanting to get involved. It was essentially easy money, and because hard work wasn't, well paying enough, and it was too hard.
Exactly. Like I'm an opportunist. Like I saw, like the marijuana business in the state of Massachusetts. If you got caught with 50 pounds or under, not in the school zone, it was a misdemeanor charge. And most likely you're going to get maybe probation for that. So the amount of money that you could make, and I got taught all about all this by seasoned criminals when I was in state prison. I went to prison at 21. I was around guys that were doing life bids, all kinds of organized criminals, Irish and Italian, and they were teaching me, ways to really make money on the streets without risk. And one of them was the marijuana business. And so that's what I pursued when I got out, was the marijuana. And it wasn't like there was a lot of risk involved. Like if I just stuck with the marijuana business, which that was so lucrative for me, I didn't have to join the mob. I could have just been a marijuana dealer and then branched off and put my money into real estate. But that didn't happen because the mob approached me, and I liked that lifestyle of the mob. It was like growing up Italian. If you're wild, you're number one, you're not going to join a gang. Like today, there's gangs out there. Kids join, all these different types of gangs. Well, if you were Italian back in the 80s, growing up, 90s, and you were a criminal and you were, say, a violent criminal and you know how to make money in the streets, your goal is the mafia is going to come and search you out and want you to be with them.
Talk to me and talk to the audience about the Genovese crime family in general. We've done a lot of segments on the Genovese crime family and the characters involved in the Genovese family, folks like Vincent Gigante and others. And it seems like out of the 6 crime families in the New York area, they traditionally have been the most secretive, and at least until a few years ago, they didn't have the same problem with informants that a lot of the other crime families have had. Where does the Genovese crime family come in with respect to their relationships with the other crime families? And talk to me about their role in Springfield, Massachusetts in general. When you think of the 6 New York, New Jersey area crime families, you don't necessarily think of Springfield as one of the territories that they have domain over, but clearly they were very influential. Tell me about the Genovese crime family and how their relationship with Springfield, Mass came to be.
Yeah, so the Genovese family is one of the, like you said, 6, counting New Jersey, one of the most powerful families that existed all throughout time, throughout the existence when the mafia was created. They had factions in New Jersey. They had factions in Florida. And going back to the 1930s, they had factions in Springfield, Mass. So we were a large presence of mafia, specifically the Genovese crime family, which was, like I said, the most powerful, if not, one of the most, and then they became the most, and to this day, they are the most powerful mafia families that they are. They're very secretive. They're very, they try to like hide who their official bosses are. Like when you mentioned Vincent the Chin Gigante, there was a case back in the 80s with the commission case, and Anthony Fat Tony Salerno ended up getting 100 years on that case. And come to find out that he was just the upfront boss. He wasn't really.
He was a figurehead.
He was a figurehead for the Vincent Gigante, and that's what they do. They isolate themselves. They put it out there like who's really running things, but really in the background there's other bosses that are really pulling the strings and calling the shots. That's why they've been so successful. They also, when I was getting heavily involved, and we're jumping ahead to later on when I got inducted into that family, they stopped sharing information with other families. It used to be like they would pass around names of who were going to be the new inductees into the family. They stopped doing that. They didn't trust the other families. So they kind of like isolated themselves within themselves. And they've always been a secretive society. Springfield was heavily involved with the Genovese, back, when the 30s came. When Big Nose Sam, he was one of our bosses, the local facts for the Springfield faction. He was a legendary Don. I mean, he was at the Appalachian meeting in 1957, and everybody knows about what happened there. He was actually there, and he built up a crew, and very powerful crew he built up with soldiers, and there was an article in the Boston Herald in 2006 by Michelle McPhee. And
sure, I know Michelle. She's a friend of mine.
Right, and I posted that article on my Instagram, but she pointed out the investigators told her that there was more made members and associates in the Springfield, the city of Springfield and the surrounding area than anywhere in the country, including the strongholds of Brooklyn and the Bronx.
Wow.
Of course, going by per capita. We were loaded with just mafia members and associates, and it ran all the way up throughout Connecticut. Because Springfield's a smaller city, but when you look at the territory and you include Connecticut with it, and Hartford, you got New Haven, Connecticut, all the way down to Bridgeport, Stamford, cities all the way up and out, throughout Connecticut. Then you got Worcester, Mass, another city that's in central Mass. So, then you're going all the way to Albany, New York, which is deep Western Mass, and then it gets into Albany. That's a huge territory. So we had a lot of made members and associates that were running it. And like I said, Big Nose Sam was a legendary boss. And he ran that up until 1983 or 84. I believe it was 83 when he passed. So the Genovese family had a big presence in this in Springfield and throughout Connecticut, all the way back into the 30s, 20s, 30s.
So in the prologue of your book, the title of the prologue is Killing Gary. It has to do with someone named Gary Wasserman, and the story is told in very vivid detail. Tell folks who Gary Wasserman was.
So his name is pronounced Westerman.
Excuse me.
Yeah, he was an organized criminal. He wasn't Italian, but he was still a capable, organized criminal. He was mostly into the drug game, and he was around mobsters and mob associates. He ended up going to prison for cocaine distribution back in the 80s. And so he was like a seasoned criminal that was around the Springfield faction of the Genovese family. And I met him in 1996 when he came home from prison. My friend Freddie was friends with him, and he had just come home from doing a state prison sentence. I think he got 10 years for that. And he heard about who I was. My nickname is Bingy, like you said, Bingy. And he used to always hear stories about me throughout the state prison system from people that were coming into the system. So he knew of me, just that we never formally met. When I met him in 1996, Freddie introduced me to him, and he said, "Wait a second." He goes, "Are you Bingy?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Wow." He goes, "You're like notorious in the state prison system. Your reputation." He goes, "I thought when I met you, you'd be like 6'3" and, like a lot bigger guy because of your reputation." And So that's how we ended up meeting, and he continued his his drug dealing. Him and Freddie used to go on they ended up getting arrested for hijacking a truck with stolen, computers or whatever. They were trying to off the computers. They ended up getting arrested. So they were going to face, state prison time. Freddie wanted to kill him and get rid of him back in 96. We put a plot together to do that, but the plot got foiled because when one of the participants that were going to murder with us, Luda Shoe Santos, he went to the door to pick him up, and we were going to, put him in a van and get rid of him that night. But the guy's girlfriend ended up being there, so he would have been exposed. So we didn't go forward with it. Freddie ended up getting 4 years. He ended up getting 4 years. So they come out in around 2001. He comes back out in 2001. He's back in the drug business, and he starts dating my wife's sister, which he was like 30 years older than her at the time. And that wasn't good for my wife's family. They were Italian immigrants. They were really complaining about it heavily. They wanted me to do something about it. I talked to him a couple of times. He said he was going to stop dating her. But he didn't. He kept dating her. My wife's family kept busting my balls about it. What are you going to do about this? And so finally I had enough of it, and we put together a plan to kill him again. We set up to kill him at a restaurant. Freddie was going to take him out to dinner. I was outside with a driver, Michael DeCaro, and Michael was going to drive. I was going to shoot him. They parked in a wrong spot. By the time we pulled up to the car, they were already in the Porsche. I would have had to shoot into the car and shoot at and possibly hit Freddie because it was, the Porsches are small. So we didn't kill him that night. And then eventually he ends up getting not welcomed. My wife's mother ended up accepting the relationship, and they ended up getting married, and that was it. So I washed my hands of my involvement in, at that time. But then around a year later, it comes out that we find out he's an FBI state police FBI informant, and that's when we put in motion to kill him, and that's what ended up happening. We lured him to a spot and killed him and buried him.
But to be clear, initially, your beef with him was purely personal. It had nothing to do with carrying out a sanctioned mob hit on him.
Well, when it first came out, it was personal with Freddie. Freddie wanted to kill him because he thought without him on the case, he could beat the case.
Understood.
So that was in 96. And then it got personal with me when he started dating my wife's sister,
Gotcha.
which it wasn't as personal with me as it was with my wife's family, but it was personal as far as a guy like him, he was like I said, an organized criminal, but a guy like that being that close to me wasn't good.
Right.
Him being married to my wife's sister. So yeah, that's how it was personal on that aspect.
Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
Early on in the book, I think it may even be chapter 1, you describe getting your button, getting straightened out. This is something that there's been a lot of movies made about, a lot of books written about. There's a lot of mythology about. Folks have testified in court about this, but there still seems to be so much curiosity about the process, how it comes to be, what the rules are, what the oath is, what omerta actually is. Wondering if you could take listeners behind the scenes in that process a little bit. Tell me when you learned you were going to be straightened out, and tell folks how that process works.
Okay, so back in those days with the mafia, to be they would propose you to be a member. That means they would you could be an associate, but then they would come to you and say, we want to propose you one day. We want to make you a inducted into the mafia. So now you become proposed. Now what that means is, one day you're going to have to participate in a murder. That's how everybody had to get made. 90% of the mafia population participated in a murder back then. So I was officially proposed to be made. I was ordered to kill a union boss in New York City where I went down to New York and shot the labor union boss 9 times on the streets of New York. So participating in that hit is what got me inducted into the family. So I was told I was told by an associate to come to New York. And the thing about it, when I was inducted, we brought up how there was the Springfield faction, of the Genovese family, and then there was like New Jersey, Florida. So Springfield, the boss here could make his own people. He'd get permission, he'd bring the list to New York, they'd okay it, and then he could have a ceremony done in Springfield, and he could make his own soldiers in the family, which was what happened in Springfield throughout the history of it. But with me, because I did the hit in New York for the actual boss of the Genovese family in New York City, because he really took a liking to me, took a liking to my crew. He knew I had the largest crew, the biggest earners, the most vicious. So because I participated in that hit in New York, they sent for me in New York and to get inducted into the mafia by the New York bosses in New York, which holds a lot more weight than if I got inducted by the boss here. Because if I got inducted by the boss here, I'd be a soldier underneath him. He would be the boss, which is a captain in the family. But I got inducted by the bosses in New York, so I was direct with the most powerful family bosses in the country. So I was told to go to a restaurant in the Bronx and be there for 11 o'clock in the morning. Now I knew I was going to get made, but I'm not supposed to know. That's one of the things they tell you. So I get to the restaurant and there's a bunch of Genovese captains. Couple of them I didn't know. There's 4 other guys there that day that are going to get made along with me. When I got to the restaurant, one of the captains, his name was Joe, he tells me to take off my jewelry, any beepers and phones, leave them in the, leave them at the bar. And they were going to do 2 at a time, take 2 of us out at a time and bring us to a undisclosed location. And that's where you were going to get made. The guy, Joe, whispered in my ear, he says, when they bring you there and they ask you, do you know why you're there? Make sure you tell them no. So the 2 guys went before us, and then me and this kid, Ralphie, who's a big-time Genovese captain now in the family in New York, me and him go next, and they bring us into this social club setting in an apartment building in the Bronx. And you walk in, and, they did one at a time. They did Ralphie first, and then they came to get me. And when you walk into the room, there's the 2 bosses sitting at a table with a gun and a knife on it. And they ask, you sit down, they ask you, why you're here. No, we're part of a secret society. You want to be a part of this secret society that we're a part of. Yeah. And they go through the formalities. There's a gun and a knife on the table. Would you use the gun if we asked you to? Would you kill for us? Would you kill for the family? Yes. And they, they take out a saint. They have you cup your hands. They burn a tissue of the saint in your hands, and you repeat after them. I'm taking an oath to, of omerta to the family. And as you're saying this, you're cupping the fire in your hands and you're repeating after the boss. If I betray this oath, death is, I'm going to be killed. And it's, it's like a little thing. And when you're done, you clasp the fire out in your hands. And then they go over if your family, this family comes first above anything else in the world. Before your family, if we tell you to kill your brother, would you kill your brother for the family? Yes. Would you, if your wife was given birth and the boss called for you and you had to leave, your wife at wherever, or your dying mother, and we called for you, would you come? Yes. They went over some rules. They don't deal in drugs and counterfeit money. If you do, you'll forfeit your life. It's about a 10-minute process. When they're done, they get up and they say, they recognize you as friend, friend of ours. They say, hello, friend. They kiss you on the cheek. And there was other captains that were there, and they officially introduced me. This is Anthony. This is Mikey. He's a friend of ours, Amico Nostro. And, you kiss on the cheek. And so now you become formally inducted into the family, which in my case was very big because, like I said, I was inducted in New York City with the bosses there. So that put me as like outside of there. I'm the most powerful guy that is walking around outside of New York because I was made in New York City with the bosses of the most powerful family. So it gave me weight, especially with my own faction, because at that time there was still powerful, a boss and soldiers in my area, the city of Springfield. But I report directly down to New York, which gives me seniority and power over them.
In terms of your rise through the ranks of the Springfield crew, how did you rise through the ranks so relatively quickly? And we're going to get to what happened with Big Al Bruno in just a second. But in terms of your mentorship from other ranking members of the Genovese family, in terms of what you did to, single yourself out and differentiate yourself from other members of the Springfield crew, tell people how that went from the time that you got your button to the time that you became a captain. How did you rise through the hierarchy?
So I would say I rose before I got my button. Before I got my button, I had the biggest, largest crew throughout Connecticut, Western Mass, Central Mass, East Boston. I had a crew in Boston, guys that I was in prison with, crazy Irish and Italian organized crime criminals. So I had a network of seasoned, dangerous criminals. And I also was very capable of making money, and I was very good at sharing. So I had a large crew and we were all earning big time. And I was involved in the drug business as well, which the mafia wasn't. And now I didn't report that to the mafia. I always denied being involved in it, but it also it was so lucrative that you couldn't just not get involved in it. And like I said, they told me that I would be killed if I was involved in it, but I still did it anyways. So it still didn't sway me away from getting involved in that. So what got me the attention was because of who I was, my reputation that I had a very good reputation when it came to violence and making money. When New York started coming up more, so there was a little period when I got caught for marijuana from like 96 to 98. I was put on the shelf. Bruno was the boss. I got caught. They raided my house, 40 pounds of marijuana. I got put on the shelf, which means I was like kind of banished from the mafia circles. So for 2 years, but then in those 2 years, I made millions of dollars on the streets. I made probably more money than I did by being around any mobsters at that time. I ended up beating the case because the informant was a rogue informant. He was dirty. He was corrupt. He was double dealing. He got caught with coke. So it comes out that I finally beat the case. Bruno comes out of prison in 98. He wants me to come back around him. So he asked me if I'm done selling drugs. And I'm not made at this time. I didn't get made until 2003. But at this time in 98, I started going and I knew I was doing business with all made members of the mafia throughout Boston, New York, everywhere. So when I came around, I was already well known outside of my area in other cities. And I was with a great reputation of violence and money. And I had the biggest crew around me. So I was recognized as a threat. You couldn't just like I said, when I was banished for 2 years, you just couldn't discard me because I was too much entrenched in the streets with a big, heavy crew. So everybody that knew me in our area knew of that. But then New York started coming up more often. I started going to New York. I was going to the Genoese homes and their restaurants. Bruno used to give tribute to them as far as liquor and cigars and wines and all kinds of gifts. On Christmas, I would bring it down there to them. I would go to their homes and their restaurants. I'd be around the Genoese all the time. So they started recognizing me more. But what got them to really recognize me was when Bruno became boss in 01, and they started sending an individual up named John Bologna. He was an associate. We'll get into him later, but that was the demise of everything by him sending that guy up because he was an FBI informant, and we'll get into that later. But so he started coming up. They asked us to collect a debt from a New Haven guy, owed the bosses in New York $37,000, something like that. We collected the debt from a guy who owned a scrapyard in New Haven. That was around 01. And then ever since then, this guy John was coming up, and he was bringing up New York guys, and he was meeting with me. He would meet with Bruno, but then I would be taking him out. So he was with me he'd come up on a Friday and go home on a Sunday. So he started learning more about me, my crew, what I had, what the Springfield faction had total, never mind. But when you asked about me, he started seeing how the respect that I had, the big crew he liked, they loved my crew. I had, like I said, the biggest, the most violent guys in my crew. I own nightclubs, I own restaurants, so I would bring them all around. We got treated unbelievable, like kings. So he would go down and start telling that to the bosses down there, and he's telling them, because there was two other guys that were supposed to get made, Joey Bazil and Reno Saravalo. They were on the proposed list. But when he was going down there, Joey and Reno didn't have nothing going on. They didn't have no crew. They weren't making money on the streets like I was. So I started getting noticed by the bosses down there. That's what gave me like when you said the rise is I always had that reputation locally throughout Connecticut and, like I said, Western Mass, Central Mass, Boston, but now New York bosses and New York is recognizing me as what I am and what I'm known for as being around here. So that's pretty much how I, just by being noticed more because they were coming up and noticing me and what I had. That's how I pretty much got the rise, like you were asking.
So let's talk about Big Al Bruno. Tell me about his killing and how that came to be. Tell me about why he was killed. Tell me about your role in his killing.
So Bruno was boss in 01, and, it was something that he always wanted. I was there when they informed him that he was the new boss of the Springfield faction for the Genovese family. And it was one of the best moments of Bruno's life. He always wanted to be boss. So from 01, I'm a proposed member under him, and everything is running smooth. One thing Bruno wanted to get involved in was extortion. He used to idolize Nicky Scarfo. He was very close with Nicky Scarfo, the boss of Philly. They did a lot of business together, the Genovese and the Philadelphia crime family. They used to do junkets down at Atlantic City. Bruno was always on Nicky Scarfo's boat. He was friends with all the Philadelphia guys. And Nicky Scarfo's thing was he made everybody pay a street tax. And Bruno wanted to copy that. So Bruno started implementing extortion rackets, which, we always extorted, like, say, street guys, but never business owners and people like that, legitimate people. And Bruno started implementing it in the Springfield and Connecticut area, where he was going to restaurant owners and, telling them, they were paying them money, bar owners, business owners. So that ended up growing into a big business, and everything was running smoothly for him. And then what happens is, around the beginning of 2003, the guy that I told you that was coming up, this guy John Bologna, who we were told that he was an informant, he started seeing what Springfield had, and he was very close. And at this time, the bosses in the New York family, the Gigante was in prison. Then Quiet Don was the boss. He was under some sort of indictment. So they started using a panel of 3 bosses, one to control New Jersey, one to control Manhattan, and one to control Florida and the Bronx and Springfield faction. So there was this guy there named Ernie Muscarella. He was one of the bosses, very powerful Genovese boss. And he was going to prison for 5 years. And he wanted one of his soldiers to take his spot. And this guy was just a soldier. His name was Artie Nigro. So while he was going to prison, he wanted him. The other bosses didn't want this guy Artie there. And they were smart by saying that, because this guy Artie ended up being, him and this guy John Bologna was what ruined the mafia in Western Mass and all this area. He ended up winning the decision, and Artie becomes a replacement for Ernie. So now Bruno doesn't know this. I know it because I'm getting close now with the New York part of the Genovese family. I'm coming down more. They're coming up here more. I'm meeting all the young guys, and like I said, they're knowing about me more. So now what was happening was, Bruno was, later he was drinking a little bit too much, and they were noticing that. But also their greed was, they wanted to take what we had here, because don't forget the way that it was never done ever. No money ever went down to New York from Springfield to New York. Like I said, Bruno would just say, give them tribute. But now with this greediness of this new guy, Artie, and he's having this guy, John Bologna, an associate, come up, they started seeing the money that was being made here. And Frank, if I could tell you the money that we were making, throughout, never mind the money, I was a multimillionaire, and I wasn't even a made guy, wow, back in that time.
Yeah. So give me an idea. Give me an idea of the money that's being made. Yeah.
I mean, it just, if me, myself, I'm making, say a couple million a year, that's just me, and I'm not even a made guy. These soldiers that were made and their associates around them were, like I said, we had the most, I explained to you earlier about the most members and associates per capita. And we had a big territory. So when you talk about Springfield, you're not just talking about Springfield, you're talking about a territory that is probably bigger or just as big as New York, because we have it all the way through Connecticut and all the way to Albany and all the way to Central Mass. That whole area was bringing in millions of dollars a week when you add it all up, through the marijuana, the stuff that I had. And I had all my crew selling marijuana. I was the largest distributor of marijuana probably at that time in this whole Western Mass, Connecticut area. So all my crew members, I made millionaires out of all these guys that were in my crew, just on the rackets that we had going on. So the amount of money that was going on. So New York saw this, and the guy John saw this. So we owned all the strip clubs, like legitimate businesses. We owned the strip clubs. We owned the restaurants. And there was multiple. We had 5 strip clubs just in downtown Springfield alone, all controlled by organized crime. We had the ones in Connecticut, all controlled by organized crime. going to Worcester, controlled by organized crime, restaurants, all the vending machines. The vending machine business was bringing that one faction $200,000 a week, their end cash, $200,000 just from the vending, and that was just one faction, of money. So, like I said, when you add it all up, not me, I wasn't making, $5-10 million a week, but if you add up everybody that was making money with never mind all the bookmakers, there was hundreds of bookmakers. I mean, we probably had 50 bookmakers just in the Springfield area. Never mind now you're going to Hartford and you're going to, and don't forget, there was other families too at the time that were big in Connecticut. So they see the money that we're making, and now the greed starts setting in because now this guy John is going back to the guy Artie and telling him, you're the boss. These guys are all with you. And he was feeding it in his head, and he was knocking. There was a lot of people didn't like Bruno. Bruno wasn't well liked when it came to mafia soldiers. He was well liked when it came to businessmen making money, people that weren't part of the mafia. He was great at that because he was a salesman. He knew how to, like a politician. He knew how to move around like that. He was the best at that. But when it came to his own circle of soldiers, they didn't like him. And these guys were dangerous guys. So they all started, they would beef on him. In the mafia, you beef on a guy, and it could lead to him getting murdered. But depending on what it is, if it wasn't something serious, they would just demote you, take you down from, like, say, a captain to a soldier. Or if they would, if you were a soldier, they'd just shelf you, and you wouldn't be recognized anymore. But in Bruno's case, they were looking to take him down and make him his boss position. They were trying to put him to a soldier. And the reason they were doing that was purely greed. They wanted to siphon the money that we had. They saw everything that we had going on. That's why they wanted me to shoot the guy in New York, because they wanted me directly with them. So I would have to answer directly to them and take orders from them in New York. And it wasn't them. It was just one guy, Artie Nigro. He was the boss that fucking destroyed everything. He was the guy that put this guy John Bologna. And this guy John Bologna, the day I met him, was just a bad vibe I got from him. Just like when you meet somebody, the vibe I got was just bad the first day I met him. And he started coming up. So the next 2 years he's coming up. Their plan was to take Bruno and take him from a captain, a boss, to a soldier, not to kill him. He was not going to get killed. And it was based all upon greed. And I'll even give you an example. There was a captain for the Genovese family, which is a boss in Florida, Ray Ruggiero. Him and Artie robbed Bruno for $250,000 on a cigarette deal. So when you never hear of that, especially with the Genovese family. I mean, these guys were the most wealthiest family. You never would rob another brother, especially like a guy that's a made guy, and especially a boss like Bruno. They robbed him for $250,000. So you knew Bruno was falling out of favor with Artie Nigro, who was now the actual boss. Bruno doesn't know that Artie's the boss at this time. I do. So then, like I said, I go down, I shoot the guy in New York. I end up getting made. Bruno doesn't even know I'm made. So the plan was Bruno was going to get taken down from a boss to a soldier. I'm already made, so like I said, I already have all the power. But like the Genovese family does things very secretive. What the plan was, they were going to leave me under the radar. So I was going to be the one calling all the shots. Then they were going to plant this lightning rod, Felix Tranghese, who was another soldier made guy. And they were going to make him like the public boss, like they did to Fat Tony Salerno and the Gigante. They were going to say Felix is the new boss, so he would have all the FBI scrutiny. And he would get all the law enforcement attention. Meanwhile, I got the real power, and I got all the power and everything. That's the way the plan was going to go down until there was an indictment with the old bosses in the Springfield faction, Albert Chabelli and Anthony DeLavo. They were two bosses in the Springfield faction. And one of the things I want to tell you, when they started coming up here, they started extorting. Anthony DeLavo put in work, killed multiple people, was a low-key mobster, very violent, one of those old school Mad Hatters. And he was partners with this guy, Jimmy Santinello, who was another informant that owned the strip club, Mardi Gras strip club, and the other 4 strip clubs in Springfield. Well, they were extorting him. This is what it led to. It led to where you're extorting your own guys now, because Anthony DeLavo was actually partners in the legitimate strip club business, and they were extorting his partner. So that's what New York implemented under Artie's, when Artie became boss. So Bruno, the 2 guys I told you about that got arrested, Anthony DeLavo and Babish Valley, there was like 9 of them that got arrested in a racketeering case in 2000. Well, come 2003, the discovery comes out. And in the discovery, this kid, Emilio Fusco, he's another made member of the Springfield faction. He was going to get 2.5 years. He ends up getting 3.5 years because they said he was a made member. He denies it. So they come out with proof that he's a made member. And the proof was there was a 302 document with Al Bruno talking to an FBI agent. And in the 302, it's got Bruno saying that Emilio Fusco was a made guy, how many made members we had in the Springfield faction throughout this area, and other things that he got involved in, and it was a very bad paper, and it wasn't good for Bruno because they were looking to take him down already. He was going to get called down there, and they were going to tell him, you're no longer recognized as the boss, you're going to get demoted to a soldier, you're going to report to this guy, and that's all that's what was going to happen. But now they got this paper. When that paper surfaced, Emilio obviously brings the paper. He brings it to the guy. He shows it to me. Brings it to Felix Stringeezy, who was the guy I told you about they were going to put as the lightning rod for the Springfield faction. And they called down to New York, and Artie asked them to bring the paper down. So Felix Stringeezy brings the paper down to New York. Then they have another meeting with the bosses in New York. Like I said, they were using a panel. There was Mario Gigante and Larry Dentico. And at the meeting, the paper was exposed, the 302 of Bruno talking to the FBI agent. When they saw the paper, that's when the order to kill Bruno came. Now, I didn't get the order directly. The order was given to, because like I said, I report directly to the bosses in New York. Artie Nigro was the one who made me, so he's the one that gives me my orders. He never gave me the order to kill Bruno at that time. He gave it to Felix Stringeezy. So Felix Stringeezy is the one that got the order. He came back from New York. He says that, Bruno, I just got an order to kill Bruno. So I'm thinking in my head, good, you got an order to kill him. You kill him. I didn't get told to do nothing. And that's just how that's how I treated it. Like, no, I don't report to you. I got more power than you. You don't tell me what to do. And even like when it came to all the street stuff, like I took over all the street rackets in this whole area, Springfield, Hartford, Connecticut, everywhere. They were all mine. I took it. Felix didn't get anything of it. I had all the power. And then he's telling me that Bruno got an order to kill Bruno. Well, do what you got to do because nobody told me what you got to do. So that's how it led up to the murder contract of the order to kill Bruno. That's how it came about. It had nothing to do with me looking to get his power. It had nothing to do with me looking to get his position. I already had the position. I already had power. I didn't need to kill him to get any more power. I was close with Bruno. He was close with my family, good friends with me. I used to play golf with my father a couple times a week. He was always at my father's business all the time. They were good friends. The day he died, actually, he came by my father's store that morning, and he was with him. So, and we were kind of like cousins on my mother's side. So it was nothing that I wanted to see happen to Al Bruno. But that's how it came about. I ended up getting involved in the murder conspiracy when Felix couldn't get the job done. And that's when I got called for down to New York to meet with the bosses down there. And I'm not even supposed to know about this murder order, because when you get told to do a murder, the last thing you're going to do is share that information with anyone, because whoever you talk about it with, now they know something that, and you're not talking about going to jail for 2 years. You're talking about going to jail for the rest of your life now. Murder is a different story. Yeah. So, but Felix told me. He wasn't supposed to tell me. So when I went down to New York, Artie asked me, do I know what's going on? And I acted like I didn't. And I just said no. And he says, all right, well, Bruno's got to be killed. And he tells me why, and he says he wants me to get involved and help Felix get it done. And, make the body disappear if you can, and don't get directly involved. And that's when I get in on the conspiracy to kill Al Bruno.
Obviously, the legal, this came to be a big legal problem for you as well. But before we get to that and your decision to cooperate, people are listening to you describe participating in murders. They're listening to you describe essentially a life of crime, stealing from people, robbing people, selling drugs. And, I'm the last person to judge anybody, but I'm just wondering, throughout your career in organized crime, did you ever experience moments of moral conflict or moments of doubt about the life that you were leading? If so, how do you cope with those feelings?
So I never experienced those moral conflicts because we are all, once you get to that level, like me, I'm a killer. Bruno was a killer. Bruno killed my father's, my friend's father. Bruno participated in several murders and was part of that life. I didn't want to see him killed. If he got an order to kill me, he'd kill me in 2 seconds. That's just part of the life we're around. I don't have any moral, like you just said, about that because we're killing each other. We're not. If I ran over a kid on the street, a little kid, and I was driving, and that would kill me. I would lose sleep over, something like that. If I if they told me I had to kill a guy and the guy's wife is with him and you got to kill her too, I want to do it. There's just, when it comes to morals like that, that's different. But when it comes to us, we kill each other. I accepted it. That's like, that going in. When I was a little kid, I always knew I might be part of the mafia. And I always knew since a little kid, being told by grown-ups, my uncle was the Big Nose Sam's driver. And he goes, if you're ever part of that life, you're going to have to kill to get in. And you're probably going to have to kill your best friend. And I always weighed that out in my head. Could I be possible to do that? So I always knew that at a young age, that's what it was going to take to be a part of that. We kill each other. We don't hurt women. We don't hurt children. And so I'd have to say, I didn't have any moral feelings when it came to that. And especially even with money too. The money part could be part of the moral feelings. If somebody owes you money and they're struggling with their wife and kids, I would be the one that would work with them. Other guys would say, I don't care, I want my money. And if they didn't have their money, give them a beating. I never hurt people over money. I never hurt people if they were behind on a loan shark payment or if they were, behind on my marijuana business and they were behind a little bit on the payments. Nobody ever got hurt by me. I'd always work with them, all right, what can you pay me? All right, can you give me so much? So that would be another thing. And again, you could call us vicious animals and killers, but we only killed each other. It's not like, you see a lot of the gang shootings and killings, they miss and they hit a little 3-year-old by accident. Now that would give me something that I would be very feel bad about.
So looking back, was there a particular moment or decision that you believe marked the beginning of your downfall? Was it the Bruno killing? Was it something else? What do you think ultimately led to your arrest and the unraveling of this criminal empire that you clearly spent a lot of time building and clearly was very important to you?
Well, so for me, I think the moment I participated in murder, everything was over then. Because when I used to make millions of dollars, and I knew if I got caught, probably the most I would get is a couple of years in prison because there was no violence involved. So I would sleep like a baby. Even though I slept like a baby after I murdered, it's a different type of sleep because I didn't care if I got arrested doing my money crimes because they didn't bring in big prison sentences. Once you murder, that's when everything changes. That's when you say, you know what, if they come and arrest me now, if it's a murder racketeering case, you're never going to see your kids again. It's done. You're going to get life in prison or, 40, 50 years. So that changes everything, that right there. But what changed everything here, living that at that time was like a perfect storm. The guy Ernie was going to prison. He puts a guy who was a soldier. The soldier jumps ahead of captains and becomes boss. He was a greedy boss. He was a bad boss. He wasn't a guy that should have been in the position. Then he gets this guy, John Bologna, around him. Now, I was in New York when the Gambino bosses pulled up in the Bronx. We got in their car, and John Bologna was outside standing on the street. And the Gambino boss says, "What's JB doing here? We chased him. He's an informant. We found out he's an informant." Now, this is coming direct from a Gambino boss. And what happens is I get out of the car and I ask Artie about it, and I say, what's up with what he just said? And he said, yeah, pay no mind to it. He's just jealous that the guy's around me now. Now, I always had a bad vibe about this guy, John, like I said, when I first met him. But now he knows about murder conspiracies that I'm involved in, and I'm finding out that he's an informant. Then I'm in with the Connecticut guys, Rico Petrillo and Anthony Beaver Sensi. And they tell me, the guy that used to wear a beard, this guy, John Bologna, they tell me that this guy that comes up to your area with the beard, he's an informant. So they had knowledge of this guy being an informant. And then there's a faction amongst our crew, Springfield crew, Babbitt Schiavelli and his crew knew. That's why they bailed and got away. They ran away from the ship because they knew that this guy was an informant. So there was 3 factions that knew that this guy was an informant. So when you see all that and you put all that together, the demise was already becoming the boss, having this guy, John Bologna, around him, and then putting him with us. The guy wasn't even a made member, and he's talking about murder with the guy. And then he knows that he's an informant, so he put this guy there knowing that he's an informant, and then he put him there to talk about murder, things that can get you life sentences. So that combination destroyed the Western, the Springfield faction, whereas they have an active informant giving information on our crew. And once you've seen that Artie robbed one of his brothers, a friend of ours, Al Bruno, for $250,000, these things were unheard of. You never would hear that with the Genovese crime family. So, it was just a bad situation for Bruno. Bruno did, do the wrong thing by, that paper, if you ask anybody, that paper would get people killed. It was a bad paper that came out about him. 100%, if you ask anybody, 100% back in those days, if that paper surfaced, if John Gotti was boss, if whoever was boss, if Raymond Patriarca was, boss, Bruno's a dead man. So, I get that. But at the same time, they were looking to destroy the guy before that paper was even surfaced. So that goes to show you the greed that they were trying to do. They were trying to pull the money away from Springfield and bring it to New York. And that was the demise of everything. And you got to look at it like this. We all know how the mob works today with all the stories that you hear about bosses that are informants. Whitey Bulger. You got the guy in the Colombo family, Carmen Persico, that had Scarpa around him. It came out in the newspapers front page that Carmen Persico was an informant. Now, people are going to say, well, the guy did his whole life.
That Scarpa was an informant.
Right, but it came out in the front page of the Daily News that Carmen Persico was an informant. Now, you're going to say, how can you say that he's an informant? He's been in jail in his whole life. Well, the Daily News posted on the front page of the paper, Carmen Persico was an FBI informant. So that's after he passed. This was like a year ago, 2 years ago. That came out. You can Google it and look at that. So now Scarpa was an informant for 30 years. My belief is the reason they put that because Persico knew and put Scarpa up to being an informant. That's my belief on that. Because that's what they do. These bosses, that's how they operate. Even Al Bruno, the faction in Springfield, they were doing the same thing here. They controlled the state district attorney from the 70s all the way up into the mid-90s. And they murdered, like I told you, Bruno murdered my friend's father. Well, the reason he got murdered was because he was giving cocaine to the district attorney's daughter The district attorney beefed on him to the mob, and they ended up, killing the guy. So they owned the district attorney here. Now, they were given that information. They were giving information to that district attorney against their rivals. So, there you go right there. That's just a perfect example of how they operate and how they work. So I'm thinking in my head, Artie is doing the same thing with this guy, John Bologna.
Three final things that I want to explore with you before we run out of time. And believe me, I could talk with you all day. I hope we could do a part 2 on this, and I can't wait to finish reading the book. In terms of your management of the Springfield crew, maintaining power, during your 7-year reign, how did you maintain control and power within such a volatile environment? What were the biggest challenges that you faced from rivals, both within the organization and from outside the organization?
So I'll be honest, I never got challenged. I was never challenged.
Wow.
Yeah, even when I went to prison in 05 to 08, I was bringing in over $100,000 a month to my family with my rackets. And that's while me being in prison and not being able to monitor it and everything. I was just a very respected street boss. Another thing is, I didn't just send people to go out and do my dirty work. I went with them, and everybody knew that about me. When somebody went out and murdered, I didn't say, go kill the guy for me. I actually went with them and participated either in the conspiracy part to get the murder done, but in actual murders, I participated in the murders. Like I was the shooter in the New York shooting that we shot the labor guy. I was participated in the Westerman murder. I always participated in the several murder conspiracies that I was charged with. I always participated in the beating. So I always had that reputation. Nobody would want to cross me because I was coming home from prison. I had 3 years. So they knew that what they would have to deal with when I came out. So I never was challenged. In fact, the guys that knew I was made directly with the bosses in New York. So that gave me the power over all of that. I think, what I think? I think the most I was challenged would be by outsiders of, while I was growing into power, you create enemies, and I created enemies with other entities and things like that, but never internally.
Gotcha. Makes sense to me. Now, given the fact that it sounds like you're a tried and true gangster, a total believer in La Cosa Nostra, benefiting financially, and not even challenged internally, which is more than a lot of other captains can say. Talk to me about your decision to cooperate. What was the turning point that led you to cooperate with the authorities? Was it a gradual decision or more like a sudden realization?
So, with with that decision, when Bruno got killed, I picked up 4 indictments in the next 4 years. 2 days later, he got killed. I got arrested. Then in 05, I picked up another case, and then in 05, I picked up a third case. So I go to prison. I plead out. I get 3 to 3.5 in the state, 29 months in the feds. I go do my time. While I'm doing my time, I get another indictment for extortion. I go to trial. I beat that case. I come out in 08. Now, all the time, people can tell you in life what matters most to you. I had little kids at the time. I was married. I had money. I had a girlfriend. I had like a beautiful life I was living. I had businesses. But the whole thing is your little children always affected me about being away from them. When I came home in 08, I was approached by this guy, John Bologna. He was wearing a wire on me. And like I said, we always were told that this guy was wearing a wire. So a couple years go by, 2010 comes, I get indicted for the racketeering. I know I'm going to get indicted because I'm warned a month ahead of time that I'm going to get indicted for a murder racketeering case. So I start planning all my businesses so the money can get flowing like I was back in 05 to 08 to my family. And I start getting an attorney. I get one of the best attorneys in New York, John Mitchell. He represented all the mobsters. He was close with the Genovese in me. And I'm going to fight the case, and just like I always do, So they finally arrest me. Now they had arrested Artie. Artie was doing 5 years in the Fort Dix for he got arrested in 05 too. So he was wrapping up his 5-year sentence. He got indicted on the case a week before I did. I think I got indicted the 18th of February. He got indicted the 10th. So they arrest me. I'm facing a death penalty case. They take me. They transfer me to Rhode Island to wait because the case came out of New York. So they transfer me to Rhode Island to wait to get transported to New York so I can get arraigned. So during this time, I'm planning on fighting the case, and, you know, I'm getting, like, you know, the discovery of, like, John Bologna wearing the wire on me. And, you know, no thoughts in my head ever crossed my mind about going that route of cooperation. Then my lawyer comes up to me and tells me that a made guy, Felix Stringese, who was participated in the Bruno murder, he's going to cooperate. They have the shooter in the Bruno case who's already cooperating. They have another made member, Ray Ruggiero, that robbed Bruno of the $250,000. He's cooperating. So I know pretty much it's going to be a hard case to beat. But what got me and pushed me over the edge was when John Mitchell comes up to me and visits me at Rhode Island, and he says, New York bosses are worried sick. I go, why? He says that Artie isn't in the system. That Artie Nigro that was supposed to be at Fort Dix that got indicted, he was the number one on the indictment. I'm number two. He's no longer in the system. So right when I heard that, now my head, you know, it's like my heart drops. I was like, I'm never getting out of prison. So that was the final straw. And then I start thinking, because, you know, when you're in prison, you got time to think. And I'm thinking, like, this was all a setup from the beginning, because how could this guy who was told, this guy's supposed to be a New York wise guy, he gets told that the guy's an informant. I tell him that the other factions tell us, 3 different families tell us that this guy's an informant, yet he puts him around us and puts him, never mind around us, but puts us in direct contact with murders. Like, he knew about the murder, the hit out in New York. He was involved in that one too. So it's like, how am I going to beat the cases? And that's when the decision finally clicked in my head to go that route.
As you know, probably better than I do, a lot of people in the criminal world, especially in the mob world, view cooperating with the authorities as the ultimate betrayal. How do you respond to those, including people that might be listening now, who might label you a rat? And what do you say to people who feel betrayed by your decision?
So I would say that you have to live the life to understand it, that the life is so treacherous that the majority of the street gangsters in one way or another are some form of informants themselves. Like the Springfield faction had Jimmy Santinello, who was a mob associate, partners with Anthony DeLavo. It came out in the papers. You can Google it. He's been an informant since the 1980s. You had other gangsters from the Springfield area that were nephews of mafia made members, Mario Fiore, meeting with state organized crime criminals about how we were extorting them. You have informants that are walking the streets that you can't prove that they're informants, but you just know that they're informants. So when you see how the treachery is, you don't know who is an informant. The only way you know at the end is when the curtain's pulled and the guy's got to come out and either go to jail for life or end up making a deal with the government. That's how it comes out. But the other ones you don't hear about. So in that case, you know, and it's not just the mafia at work. So when you see these big drug cartels and you see the bosses out there, how, you know, Pablo Escobar, El Chapo, the guy they just arrested, they work with the government, giving up their rivals. And that filters all the way down. So, you know, if people really understand the streets, and if they were ever in prison and they saw how many informants really exist on the street, you know, I'm going to tell you this. It's the people that use those terms are the wannabes that never amounted to anything on the street, never were about anything, were people that just make up stories that, you know, were on the fringes of maybe small level organized crime activity. And those are the ones that you'll see, use those terms. And
Well,
also, you'll see a lot of fake trolls use those terms. And I'm going to be honest, in my case, I think it all comes down to a jealousy. I don't think anybody cares about the fact that I cooperated, knowing the circumstances that happened in my case. But when you go by human nature and they see that I didn't get life in sentence, I still got 8.5 years, and then you come out and you're living better than them, I think a lot of it has to do with jealousy.
Well, so let's talk about that, right? And I agree with everything you said. And I don't judge anybody's decisions because, and I don't think you can until you've walked a mile in their shoes. No criminal, no cop, no informant, no anybody, no judge, no juror, anybody. But a lot of folks are going to look at your situation and see someone that participated in murders, that spent years stealing and robbing from people, whereas other hardworking Americans are doing what they're supposed to do rather than kind of taking the easy way to fortune and power. And they'll say, all right, well, at least he'll get his when he goes to prison for decades and decades because of his participation in a life of crime. But oh, wait. Anthony doesn't have to go to prison for decades and decades because he made the decision to cooperate and he gets a get out of jail free card. Putting the morality aspect of that aside, doesn't the fact, and maybe this is a conversation that I should be having with a prosecutor, this question rather than you, but doesn't the fact that you got to go free and you're not destitute and you're as free as I am right now, doesn't that send a message to the next guy that you can commit whatever crime you want, whatever murder you want, participate in whatever criminal conspiracy you want, as long as at the end of the day you're willing to find religion and join Team America? Doesn't that send the message that you can still do all this stuff as long as you're willing to cooperate at the end of the day? Doesn't it create sort of a moral hazard that may lead other potential criminals to follow the same path you did?
Okay, so that message that you just said has been a message long in place. There's been guys that have been cooperating for forever. So it just came out more now. Throughout, you hear it more in the 80s with bigger names and everything. But that message has always been there. Sammy the Bull, he killed 19 people. He got 5 years. So if that doesn't put out a message to people, I don't think they had to wait for me with all the hundreds and thousands of informants that exist. And don't forget, my level was because of my level of who I was in that criminal underworld. So once you become that level, like I said, for the guy that's working hard, I get it. My father was a hardworking guy. It's very hard. The government takes your money, taxes. We make our money cash free. We don't pay taxes. I give total respect for the working man. But that's not his life. That he worry about his life. The working man. I took and got involved in the organized crime life. I was amongst other, like you said, thieves and killers. I never, when you said reach out to God, we all get spiritual in some way or another, but God didn't make me make that decision. I was around other murderers. I was around other, we want to call it thieves and guys that steal and murder, right? But that's what we were part of. That's what that organized crime is. We were thieves among thieves, killers amongst killers. And at the end, when a guy puts me with a guy who knows that he's an informant and wants me to throw my life away, and then when you say get out of a jail free card, I still did 8.5 years. I did 13 years of my life. That doesn't say to the fact that people say, oh, well, you should be. No, then it's none of your business if I'm doing life. When you're in that level and the guy wants me to throw my kids away, throw my wife, my businesses, throw my whole life away because you want to put a guy that's a boss and put me around an informant that participated in the murders, and then I have a way out at the end that they offer me, you'd be a fool not to take it. Like, listen, Here's the thing. I just told you the family was the most powerful family to this day is. I would rather get killed on the street than not take the chance and come back to my family and live a life again. So if that says what it is, then if I'll accept the fact if I get killed out here. Is anybody going to cry for me? No. So do you think I care what they think about me? So getting back to the hard workers, I respect the workers. When I got out of prison in 17 after doing the 8.5 years, I did have to get a job. working at a car dealership, and it's bad. Like, you've got coworkers, you've got bosses that you have to answer to, and it's a rough. The working force is a rough business. It's just as treacherous as the streets. Only people aren't getting killed, but they'll try to steal your customers. They'll try to get you fired. So, and it's not like anybody could just get out of that. You had to be a particular. The government's just not going to let. They should be asking the government why did they.
Oh yeah. Oh no.
Help.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Completely agree. And I think
people cooperate in so many different ways. Like in my case, because of my level, I had to take the stand. Now, if my guys pled guilty, I would have never had to take the stand. So everybody would have it would have never came out. But they took it to trial. You got like the guy in New York, Gotti's son. He cooperated in a different way. He proffered and sat down with the feds. That's another form of a cooperation. So you have all levels. So you got guys that are on the street that are informing, and you're never going to know who they are because they're hidden by numbers.
Yeah. I don't want to get into the whole Gotti Jr. proffer session just because it's a more complicated thing. And he maintains that he was giving them misinformation and that it never resulted in any reduction prison time or anything for him. But we'll put that aside just for no other reason than we're just about out of time.
People can do their own research on
exactly,
that, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And we're just about out of time, and I would love to do a part 2 with you next week because just on the portions of the book that I've read already, I have a lot of questions for you. But one question I do tend to ask everybody, and not everybody that I've spoken to has your level of experience in the criminal justice system, in the mafia, and everything related to that. But there's been so many mafia movies made over the course of the last 80, 90 years. And some of them, I get the sense, are very true to life. Others are totally fictitious. In your experience, of all the mob movies that you've seen or that you know about, what would you say is the most realistic look at life in the mob?
The Goodfellas movie is realistic. That is the way things were back in the 40s, 50s, and everything. Godfather 1 and 2 are realistic looks to it. The movie Casino is one. If you're going out of the country and you go to Italy, the movie Gomorrah was really accurate in the modern times of what the mafia is becoming because of the drugs. I would say things like that. And getting back to one thing that you said about the people looking in, I do have a second chance on life, and part of that is to put out some sort of redemption, helping like the things that I'm involved in now, so people don't get in. The mafia is pretty much dead as compared to what it was, but you still have gangs that are out there that are getting manipulated and into that life, and try to maybe send a message out that you don't really. And I'm not even saying when not to do crime. I mean, to me, the government, businessmen have things going on that are criminal in aspects of what they're doing. It's just that they're doing it on a different level. They're not involved in killing people in an organized crime activity and things like that. But I do have things that I'm putting out there as far as real estate classes and everything, trying to help people make money and going forward in that direction.
Yeah, if you're game, Anthony, I'd love to do a part 2 on this next week because there's a lot of aspects of the book that I haven't gotten to ask you about, and I'd love to talk to you more about what you're doing now and why you're choosing to tell this story now.
Yeah, well, it's not that I'm choosing to tell it now. I've been approached by so many people like yourself that want to, not too many people that can tell the story.
Absolutely.
In the Springfield area, there's nobody that can tell it that was actually relevant in that life but me. So it's like I have a card to play about telling it, but the reason that we wrote the book was, and it wasn't about me, and I'm just a relevant character in the book. It's called South End Syndicate. It's just that I wanted to see. You always hear about Boston, you always hear about New York, Chicago, mobsters, Philadelphia, Scarfo, and all that, but you never hear anything about Connecticut, Western Mass, and the mobsters that came out of there. So I wanted to put the story out of this area, of the legendary mobsters. You know, and it's not glorifying them. It's just somebody was living that life.
You live the history and you're chronicling it. I absolutely get it. Well, we'll continue next week if you're willing. My guest has been Anthony Bingy Arilotta. His book is going to be out very soon. You got to check it out. You can pre-order it. It's called South End Syndicate: How I Took Over the Genovese Springfield Crew. Anthony, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the conversation.
Hey, I appreciate it, Frank. Good talking with you. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank
to you
you.
Maybe next week.
I would love it. Thank you. And if you're listening to this, if somebody sent you this podcast, do us a favor and share it. You can also subscribe to the Racket Report podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just search the Racket Report and hit the subscribe button. And if you have any suggestions for more insight into what you'd like to hear in our next conversation, you're welcome to email me, frank.morano@wabcradio.com. That's frank.morano@wabcradio.com. Until the next time we meet in cyberspace, I'll see you on the radio.